Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dogs and cats, elephants and zebras, gypsies and fairies. Okay, I'm going to talk about pemmican. There's a reason I'm doing that. There's more than one reason I'm doing that. First of all, here's a piece of meat. See how thick it is? I want to show you something here. See how moist it still is? You don't want that. Okay, that's too moist. Hold on one second. Okay, I put the meat back over on the cookie sheet. I really need to trim that down over there. Anyway, my sister asked about what do you do with it. Okay, and so she wanted to know what you do with it, and also wanted to talk about the drying process, because that meat was in the oven for a very long time, more than 8 hours, because I put it on 8 hours, and I did another like 2.5, and then when I went to bed I turned the oven off, but I kept it in there because the oven was still warm. And as you could see, it's still moist. I'm looking down at one of the cats. I cut the meat too thick, which means it's going to take that much longer to dry. And as you can see with that piece of meat, it's still moist. You don't want moist meat when you're making pemmican. It will go bad. So what you want is to cut it thinner. If you saw my last video on this subject, I pretty much explained, hopefully I explained the prep process. You take your piece of very lean meat. You don't want any fat. Well, I mean, you're still going to have fat. You just want the least amount as possible. Now, last time I used ground beef, and I'm not using ground beef this time. I'm using skirt steak, or not skirt steak, cube steak, or whatever they call it here. Am I blurry, or am I... I don't know. Anyway, I took the meat and I cut it. I did cut it thin, but not thin enough. What you just saw, it was maybe 2 or 3 times that large before I started the drying process. So the moisture is being cooked out of it, but there's still too much moisture in there. You want it very dry. You don't want it burnt, but you want it dry, and eventually you're going to make it into a powder, basically, which is what we did with the first batch. So you can cut it thinner and it will dry faster, which is your best bet. When you have to dry it, as long as I'm having to dry it, you're using a lot of extra unnecessary energy. Is that the right way to say that? You are using an unnecessary amount of energy. Now, mind you, the oven's only like 180, 200, so it's not using a lot, but you have to cook it for so long. Yesterday I did 8, 9, 10, I did at least 11 hours on it yesterday. Right now the oven is at 195. I took it out and I'm cutting it up into smaller pieces. It's easy to cut up at this point because it is so dry. So it comes apart pretty easy. But if you can, you want to cut it smaller. Because the oven's on such a low temperature, it's not really heating the house. Although this time of year, to have that extra heat is not a bad thing. It's just, again, you're using an unnecessary amount of electricity if you cook it as long as I'm having to cook it. So your best bet is to go ahead and cut it really thin your first time around. The second subject my sis asked was, what do you do with it? Okay, what do you do with it? Now, I found a link and I lost the link. Sorry, but and I've been looking and looking and I haven't found it again. There are a number of ways that you can use pemmican. You can take it and just eat it as is, like an energy bar or a breakfast bar, as a candy bar. It's not candy though. It's fat, meat, and the first batch was fat, meat, and nuts. The second batch is going to be meat and berries. I didn't go ahead and measure the berries out, about a cup. They're blueberries. They're in that bowl right back there that you can see. The reason they're in there is for some of the moisture to drain out, for them to thaw because they were frozen yesterday. And eventually they're going to be thrown in the oven to dry out a little more. Well, they're not even close to dry at this point. But, so, like I said, you could eat it just, like you can make them into balls, you can make them into squares, rectangles, whatever, and you can just eat them as is. It's like an energy bar. Now, I have found some recipes that include vegetables, but I haven't made any with vegetables yet. I'm not sure how long that would last, because putting some green vegetables in there would really help. Also, I add honey to mine. It's a binder, but it also provides you some nutrition. But other things you can do with it, aside from just eating it as is, let's say in the morning you want to cook something because it has the grease in it, the fat. You take some, put it in a frying pan or any pan or pot, and heat it up. Of course, the grease is going to melt, and then throw some other stuff in there to eat with it. You're frying some food with it. Let's say you're going to make a soup or a stew. Put some water in a pan or a pot. Put some pemmican in there, and then whatever you're going to cook with it. So you can do a few different things with it, and it's going to last. I mean, it's not something that's going to go bad on you. If you prepare it correctly, it's not going to go bad on you. Those are the best ways I can think of serving it. If I find, eventually I'll find more information, or I'll find what information I had located and have since lost, and I'll try and remember to share that if depending on when I find it. I'm not sure what else to say on the subject. You can add, when you're making pemmican, you can use different kinds of meat, but don't use pork or fowl. Use beef, deer, moose, buffalo, stuff like that. Nuts, you can really put any kind of nuts in there as long as they're dry. Nuts tend to have oil in them, so you have to think of that because they will go rancid. Berries, and there are all sorts of berries you can add. I don't know, for my sister, I don't know what plants you have around. For my daughter, you may have access to juniper bushes. The juniper berries, they're edible. I don't remember if you need to process them or not, but you can use juniper berries in your pemmican. And you know, from my time in Texas, boy, let me tell you, there was plenty of junipers growing that I could just, you know, we had different names for it. We didn't always call it juniper, but I think sometimes we called it cedar. Back in the day, we used to smoke cedar bark. It didn't get you high or anything. We just thought we were cool smoking cedar bark. And what was it? Grapevines. We used to smoke grapevines too. And no, you don't get high, but the grapevine is kind of like a piece of bamboo. It has hollow sections, and you can burn it on one end and smoke it. And we were kids, you know, but we had something called a toothache tree. John, you want to say hi to the world? Oh, and what you do, it has a thin outer bark, very thin outer bark. You take your knife. Let me see here. Anyway, you take your knife. Trying to find my tool. It was right here yesterday. Anyway, you take your bark and you need just a little piece, and you put it next to your, if you have a toothache, you put it on the gum or where it's hurting, and it will actually numb it. But you want to be careful of that because you don't want to damage the tree. You don't want to kill the tree. But we called it a toothache tree, and I don't know if they have them up here or not. But John sees a flying bug. We have these things called pantry moths up here. Nasty things, almost impossible to get rid of once you have them. Once we bought a bag of mothballs. Oh boy, that got rid of the pantry moths, but it also ruined the food. We had to throw all that freaking food out. Well, Carolyn said not to do it, but I did it anyway and see what happens. So I should listen to the women in my life. But anyway, I'm not sure what else to say about pemmican. Nuts, berries, meat, tallow. Now, as I said in my last video, I'm going to be using at least some of this, probably not a whole lot of it. This is thunder fat or buffalo tallow, the thunder animal or whatever they called it. So I don't think I'm going to use but maybe half of the buffalo. Let's see how big the jar is, and once that meat is actually done, there's not going to be much of it. I forget what the ratio, the proportions, but was it 1:5 or 5:1 or something like that? But then you have the other things you're adding to it. So anyway, I hope that's some useful information. Again, if you're watching this video and you've never made pemmican and you're just looking for more information, I'm not the one to go to. There are people who know far more about this than I do. This is only my second batch. You know, we're not on the wealthy side, so when we, like right now, it's time to eat dinner. I don't feel like cooking, but I'm hungry and the wife is hungry, so I need to cook something. If we had the money, we would just go out and get something to eat. If we had the money, I could go buy nuts, I could go buy whatever we needed for pemmican. So we have to just do it a little here, a little there, because we don't have money to do stuff. You know, last year we went to the the county fair. They don't have a state fair here, just county fairs. And we didn't spend much money because we didn't have a whole lot. Thankfully, parking was free. But you know, we go out to eat. I don't know if we went out to eat more than once or twice this month. And it's usually cheap. You know, McDonald's. But anyway, so I hope that information helps.